Welcome to this episode of Eureka. We are going to have a very interesting conversation about how monsoon came into India. Do you know that almost every year in the first week of June, the southwest monsoon lashes India and people of Kerala await its onset. But if you go back in history, roughly about 1.5 crore years ago, perhaps there was no monsoon. The guest we have today, Professor Prashant Sanyal, who is the Dean of Research in Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, is working in this area, and we are going to have a very wonderful conversation about this and many other issues. We'll take a quick look at his brief profile before we start the conversation.
Professor Prashant Sanyal is heading Earth Sciences Department in IISER, Kolkata. After obtaining his MSc in Applied Geology from Jadavpur University in 1998, Professor Sanyal completed his PhD from Physical Research Laboratory, Ahmedabad in 2004. His research interests lie in evolution of Indian monsoon and its effect on ecosystem and landforms, past atmospheric CO2 variations and likes. Professor Sanyal has done exceptional research on the Shivalik sediments that showed how the Indian monsoons were initiated million years ago and its evolution, which gave him enormous popularity and success in his career. He has been bestowed with numerous awards, noted among them our National Geoscience Award in 2014 and Young Earth Scientist Award by DST in 2004.
Thank you for being with us. Let's start with this very interesting information. Is it really true that about maybe 1.5 crore years ago, India did not have a monsoon at all?
Actually, if you see the evolution of the monsoon from the geological record, it actually does show that it probably started, or maybe it was there. Its presence was not that significant around 15 million years back. So it started strengthening up, and we have some evidences which showed that yes, at around 15 million year back, it actually got intensified.
15 million year back, that is about 1.4 crore year back. What actually happened which perhaps made this great change? Something should have happened, right?
Yes, you're right. So actually, if you see the evolution of this Indian climate or the monsoon, it's actually related to the presence of Himalaya. So this Himalaya started rising up, and in addition to that, the Tibetan plateau also raised. So it actually causes a thermal gradient between ocean and the continent, and that actually resulted up in this monsoon. So even though in India the monsoon is synonymous to the rain, but actually it is not. It's actually, the monsoon means it's seasonal reversal of the wind. So during summer, as the wind comes from the ocean, so it brings a lot of moisture and it causes rain in most part of the India. And during winter, the direction of the wind reverses. So it comes from the continent. So mostly we do not get rain in the northern part of India, but yes, in some part of southern part of India, it receives rainfall during the winter because it comes over the Bay of Bengal, it picks up moisture and causes rainfall.
Yeah, actually, if you look at Tamil Nadu, 68% of Tamil Nadu's rain come from what we call as a retreating monsoon, or the monsoons during November and December. Yes. Whereas 70% of the rain for the all over India comes from the southwest monsoon, which is roughly between June to August, right? So that's a very interesting thing. Yes. But how did you find out that actually monsoon intensified 1.5 crores years ago? There was no human. Actually, humans, modern human being came to existence perhaps about 2 lakh, 3 lakh years ago. There was no human. Yes. But how did you come to know? Do you have some magic?
Yeah, actually, these are called proxy. So, see, suppose if you see the monsoon record, say we have record for say last 200 years, it's the instrumental records. Now, when you go to the past, you don't get the rain preserved there. So, what do? You look for proxies which actually preserved the rainfall record. So the proxy we use is actually the stable isotopes. So if you see the water H2O, so you have hydrogen isotope and you have oxygen isotopes. Yeah. So what we do, we take geological material and we measure those oxygen isotope and the hydrogen isotope in those compounds and try to see how the isotopic ratios of the water varied in the past.
Okay, let's look at this word isotope. Isotope means same atom coming with slight difference, right?
Yes,
Like
so
for example, oxygen can be oxygen 16 or oxygen 17 or oxygen 18, depending on the number of neutrons present in its nucleus.
So its atomic number is same, but the mass number varies.
Mass number. So there is a slight variation in mass. How is this connected to monsoon, and how does this become a proxy? How does this tell that whether there was a rain or not rain?
Yeah, yes, good question. So what happens when rains out? So normally the heavier isotope falls first. So like in water, if you see, so you will have molecule. Say if I consider in terms of the oxygen, so you will have molecule like say H18O, 18O. You can have molecule H16O, 18O. You can have molecule H16O, 16O. So out of all these molecule, the H18O, 18O will actually fall first. Okay.
Because that will be the heaviest.
It is the heaviest. So when it falls, that means as you are raining out, you are actually changing the isotopic composition of the rain. So in our science, we use a term called amount effect. So the amount effect is like as you rain out, the isotopic ratios of the water actually gets lower. So initial rain, it is concentrated with the 18O molecule. So if you make more rain, so more 16O will come. So if you go the definition of the stable isotope expression, we call it delta. So the delta becomes more negative. So the more negative delta 18O is actually indicative of more rainfall. So
More rainfall.
Yes.
At a particular given time.
Yes, you are correct.
So that's a kind of proxy. You look for this and then you find that more negative delta, which means that period of geological time, more rains have fallen.
Yes.
So you look at dig the earth and then take water samples at different levels.
Yes.
And
We don't take water sample, we take the sediments.
Okay.
As a geologist, we are interested in geological material. So we take the sediments and we measure. So for our analysis, we have used it's called calcium carbonate, so CaCO3. So in the O3 you have oxygen. So we measure the isotopic ratio in those O3.
Okay.
Okay. So after measuring that, we know okay, you have negative value. So that means it is a more rainfall during the summer. And if you get the positive value, so it will indicate that okay, rainfall was less.
Okay. So which essentially means it's like layers and layers of CaCO3 would be there. I mean, our presence of this material will be there in the land mass.
Yes.
And as you dig further and further down,
Yes.
you are going to older and older history.
Yes, you are correct.
That's what you are saying.
Yes.
And you compare at some point, below that point, you don't find too much of negative delta.
Yes.
But above that, you find too much of negative delta, and then you kind of infer that.
Exactly.
That's
So
when,
it's a relative change. We cannot say exactly how much rain was there at 15 million year back, but we know that okay, if you compare say 15 million year, 16 million year and the 14 million year, so maybe in 15 million year time, the rainfall was maximum.
that change
Yes, change we can talk about.
Very, very, very interesting, and maybe we need to take a very small break. Don't go away, we'll keep having a very, very wonderful conversation. But before the break, I want to just point out very important stuff. 15 million years ago, that's about 1.5 crore years ago, there was no human. There was no way things were being recorded by human. But still, if you use a scientific method, we can find out, at least reasonably. I mean, maybe with more equipment coming in, maybe we can be much more surer tomorrow. But at least we can know roughly when, for example, the monsoon rain started. Keep watching Eureka. We are going to have more wonderful discussions about how India shaped into what it is today after the break. Welcome back to Eureka, and we are having a very wonderful conversation with Professor Prasanto Sanyal, who is the Dean of Research in IISER, Kolkata. And he is a earth scientist, and before the break we were talking about how monsoon evolved over the Indian subcontinent. That's a very interesting piece of information that it was about 1.5 crore ago and how you are confident about it. That's much more very interesting. I'm also told that you and your student are working on Ganga. Yes. People are worried that once, if for example with the global warming, the Himalayan glaciers melt out, maybe people think that the Ganga will become dry. but then you are trying to work out how Ganga is actually getting water. Can you throw some light upon this?
Yes. So, if you see the river water, so normally in Indian kind of situation, you have three sources of water. One is the glacier melt. Suppose if you take the example of the Ganga, it starts from the Gomukh. So, when it is coming from there, so it is essentially from the glacier melt. Now, as it comes down, there are many small tributaries which actually joins to it, and then it also provide some kind of glacial melt water there, and in addition to that you get contribution from the groundwater, and also you get contribution from the rain. So, what we are trying to see, so if you see the length of the river Ganga, it is almost 2,500 kilometer, and it passes through different climatic zone. So, when we saw a report that people are worried about the glacier, existence of the glacier in the Himalaya, so then we try to understand that, okay, let us see how much water the river Ganga gets from the glacier. So, using the same isotope tool, you can actually separate out the contribution of the glacier melt, you can separate out the contribution of the rainwater, you can separate out the contribution from the groundwater, because these three components have different isotopic ratio.
Oh, okay, very interesting. So, it's the same method.
Same
but
tools, yes.
Same tool, but
Yes.
Which gives you a different indication in a different context.
Yes.
Yeah,
you're
okay,
correct.
that's very interesting.
So, what we have observed, even though still the data is not published, but we are in the process of publishing the data. So, we have observed that if you see the upper reaches of the Ganga, say till Haridwar, so there the glacier melt contribution is around say 30 to 35%. But as you come down, so you take an area of Kanpur where the rainfall is around say 800 to 1000 millimeter per year. So, there the glacier melt contribution is not much, so it is around 10%, but most of the river water you get in those areas is actually from the groundwater, which is actually stored rainwater, and suppose in a year it is raining, so some amount of water goes into the river as a surface runoff. So, the surface runoff and the groundwater actually causes significant contribution in those areas.
Roughly about 80% to 90%.
Yes, roughly about the 90-80%. So, if you come to the lower reaches, like for example in the Calcutta, so the majority of the rain, the river water in Calcutta is actually from the surface runoff. That means from the rain it is contributing huge amount. So, if you change the rainfall pattern in Indian subcontinent, so this river Ganga is also going to be affected. So, it is not only the glacier, the climate also plays important role in terms of the rain. Yes.
That's a very interesting measure. That I'm also told that you work on areas like, for example, global warming. I mean, the presence of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
in
you're
historical
right.
times.
Yes.
Let me ask this question. I mean, there is a very big debate going on. Is it really global is getting warm or not? There are two kind of opinion. People are saying no, it's all hype. What's your take on it?
See, to me, there are natural parameters which can also causes the warming. Yes, there are some component of anthropogenic activities, but there can be some natural component. So, I am not sure till date we are able to like separate out the anthropogenic component from the natural component. See, one aspect of our research actually, the Deccan volcanism, so the time when the lava came out on the surface.
Something like about 63 million years
You're
ago.
correct, yes.
Yeah.
So, what we are trying to do, using the same isotope technique, we are trying to understand, like, see, it's well known that during the Deccan volcanism, the CO2 concentration was higher in the atmosphere. So, we are trying to reconstruct the amount, like exactly what was the CO2 amount. Now, if you increase the CO2 amount, how it affected the life. Like for example, whatever organism you had during that time, how they responded to those, maybe that was a stretched condition for them because it is not a normal condition.
Yeah.
So, we are also trying to understand, say if you have high CO2 in the atmosphere, how the life responded during that time, so that you can have some comparison with the present.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Whether because of human causes or because of natural causes, if the CO2 concentration is going to go up, we would like to know how the life on Earth today would respond. So, you are trying to use the historical parallel to understand how it is going to be, right?
Yes, you are correct.
That's a very interesting part.
So, normally in our subject, what people do, like we study the present, then we go to the past. But in this condition, we are studying the past and see like how if you increase the CO2 concentration, how it will affect the life. In addition to it, say, one of our major research is on the ecosystem, especially on the vegetation. So whatever we eat is actually from the vegetation. Now there are some report which shows that suppose if we increase the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, the uptake of say zinc and iron, which are essential for our body and which we normally take from the food, that so if you increase the CO2 concentration, the plant actually take lesser amount of those elements, so iron and zinc. So people are like expecting that if CO2 concentration is going to increase the way it is going to increasing now, so it is actually affecting our nutrition level.
That's
because
also it,
yes, that is also another aspect of our research.
Very, very interesting. I mean, you are working in one area of, let's say, studying the past.
Yes.
The past evolution of, let's say, climatic conditions, or largely what can we say that the past earth sciences.
Yes.
In addition to questions like, for example, when did the monsoon evolve, which is a kind of question that you are trying to address, what are all the other major areas that people are exploring?
Yeah, so if you see this monsoon, it is not only in the India, in other parts of the world also we get monsoon, like some part of the US, some African countries, in the Australia you have monsoon, and they are actually, like in India we get most of the rainfall in the summer. If you see the Australian monsoon, it is actually most of the rainfall is during the winter.
Okay.
So we are trying to actually understand how in different kind of monsoonal situation, these ecosystems, especially the vegetations, have responded in different kind of monsoonal condition.
Okay, okay, that's a very interesting point. When people talk about studying the past, most of us would know that you study fossils.
Yes.
That's what we think is the only way the studying the past actually occurs, particularly if you're going to talk about the life forms, how the life form evolved and radiated into different species.
Yes.
What are all the new methods that you are using today?
Yes, so you are correct. Like previously people used to study the life form using the fossils. Now yes, that is the best way to study the past because you can see what was there. Now the problem with the fossils is most of the cases it is fragmentary in nature. You do not get continuous records of fossils because their preservation potential varies. So from the fossil we have started use these isotopes. Now previously what people used to do, they used to measure the isotopes in the bulk. Say suppose for example you want to study the vegetation. So what do? You take the residual organic matter from the soil and then you study. Now what we have observed that if you take that residual organic carbon, so not that all the components of the original life material is preserved there. Okay. So then even if you are using the isotope, but still you have some problem. So what we are doing now in our laboratory, like we have set up a protocol where you can actually extract the resistant compounds from the organic matter. So for example, if you probably have observed in the leaf, you have a waxy coating.
Okay.
So that wax material is actually most resistive components in the leaf. So
it's like, for example, most of the human fossil, the teeth is the most found component because it lives longer.
It lives longer.
So what do you mean by the resistive component is this something that will live very long?
Yes,
the same component.
Okay. Yeah, you are correct. So what do? We extract compounds from those waxy materials. So it's actually lipid, and lipid also consists of several other chemical compounds like alkane, fatty acid, alcohol. So if you see the characteristics pattern of those alkane, fatty acid and alcohol, so if a fatty acid, alcohol or the alkane is produced by higher plants, they have different signal compared to a fatty acid, alcohol or the alkane produced by the lower organism, means bacteria and all. So you can actually separate out the contribution of the bacteria and the higher plants in the past using these lipid compounds. And what we can do, we have also set up the technique to measure the isotopic ratio, that carbon isotopes or the hydrogen isotopes in those compounds, and we are trying to reconstruct the past.
This is a very, very interesting point. We will continue the discussion after the small break, and after the break we are going to have a very wonderful conversation about how this kind of techniques has given us some new information about how life and the climatic conditions evolved in India. We'll take a very short break. Keep watching Eureka. Welcome back to Eureka, and we are having a very wonderful and interesting conversation with Professor Sanyal, who is the Dean of Research in Indian Institute of Science Education and Research in Calcutta, and he is an earth scientist. And particularly, he looks at studying how climate and other features evolved over Indian subcontinent in the past. It's a very interesting field, and I'm getting to know very, very interesting stuff. In the beginning of the program, we talked about southwest monsoon, which kind of provides about 70% of the rainfall to India. And when people talk about monsoon, that's what largely most part of India know as monsoon.
Yes,
but
you're
then
correct.
for people like us who come from Tamil Nadu and parts of South India, actually we get rains during November and December, which
Yes.
is usually called as northeast monsoon.
Yes.
When did this monsoon evolve?
Yeah, actually, in terms of the rainfall data of the northeast monsoon, we do not have much data actually. So there are some studies from the ocean where people talk about the wind speed in terms of the northeast monsoon. Yes, we do have some data, but from the continent till date we did not have. So our lab is the first lab where we have started reconstructing this northeast monsoon using the isotopic ratios in the Alkane, and we did it from a lake record. So that study showed that the northeast monsoon and the southwest monsoon, they are in antiphase. So that means that whenever you had increase in the northeast monsoon in the past, so we have record for around 2,500 years.
2,500 years.
Yes.
Okay.
So what we observed that from the 2,500 years ago, the northeast monsoon started increasing, and the southwest monsoon is actually decreasing in the southern part of India. So that is in terms of the rainfall. So yeah.
This is the one information that we have,
Yes.
some connection between these two.
Yes.
But what is the implication of this? I mean, what does it mean? What does it imply to us today?
So as I have told you that this rainfall actually controls the vegetation, and that is what actually we eat. Now, if you increase the northeast monsoon continuously, then it is going to affect the vegetation. So that means the southern part of India is known as the food bowl of this Indian continent. So that means if you are increasing the northeast monsoon continuously, it is definitely going to affect the food production. Even though I don't work on the agricultural aspect of this, but I can assume that yes, if you increase the northeast monsoon, it is going to affect the productivity of
Or at least when to crop, when to plant, all
Yes.
the agricultural cycle, there will be a
Yes,
major
you're correct.
affection because of this.
Yes.
That's an interesting point. Let's come to a very interesting question. I mean, it's a kind of a very wonderful and interesting area that you are working on, which is in some sense offbeat. I'm sure when you are studying your school, 11th and 12th, and then wondering what should I do in future, this was not in your mind,
Yes, you are
right?
correct. Even
So how did you land up here?
Yeah, even see, I didn't know about this. The subject called geology exists. My native place is actually in the northern part of this Bengal. So I came to Calcutta for my admission in a university called Jadavpur University, which is one of the best university in our country. So, so one of my relatives said that if you want to study like maths and physics, you could have studied in your place. So he said that why don't you try this subject, geology? I said okay. So that is how actually I landed up in geology. Now I found that see, it's an interdisciplinary subject. You have components of physics, you have components of maths, you have components of chemistry, you have components of biology here. So it's actually makes very interesting. Now I realize that I did not took a wrong decision, and my relative who actually suggested me to this subject, he was correct. And I actually told him that okay, whatever suggestion you gave me, it actually paid. So I am very happy today. And in this ISER system, actually my first job was in IIT Kharagpur. So I taught there 5 years, and then I joined this ISER system. So I found this is for the science, like I work on the basic science, so I found this system is very encouraging. And our director at present, Professor R.N. Mukherjee, he always encourages us, and whatever the instrumental facility we have got is actually, he actually encouraged us to set up the high-end laboratories, and the lab which I showed you is actually supported by our institute.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And coming back to the ISER system, which is a very unique experiment in this country.
Yes.
I'm told that right from your undergraduation, you are involved in research. So research and studies go hand in hand in this system. Can you elaborate on this?
Yes. So here it's actually 5 years BSMS course we call. So students get dual degree. So at after the 4th year, the 4th to 5th year, that means the last 1 year, they exclusively work on their project. So I have seen even my students, they are actually publishing paper, whatever work they have done in last, say in their dissertation work. So in ISER Kolkata, what students do actually, so the first year they study all the 5 science subject we have. So we have physics, we have chemistry, we have biology, we have maths, we have earth science. In the second year, they take out of these 5, they take 3 subjects. Okay. So it's kind of pre-major. And the third year level, they actually take 1 subject as a major. Yes.
That's an interesting point. Let's come to another area where I would like to ask you a certain question. Like, you have been working on this, looking at the past history.
Yes.
I mean, very intensively on various things.
Yes.
It's very interesting. But is it having any practical utility? Is it going to give us any inkling into how we should act today?
Yes. See, if you say suppose the monsoon, if you take the example of the monsoon, there are 17 to 18 parameters which controls the monsoon strength or how much rain you are going to have. Now, how do you know what are the factors which control the monsoon? So, to know that, you need to study like when it has initiated. Now, that means you have to go to the past. Now, if you go to the past, then only know, okay, these are the factors, these are the parameters which affected the monsoon. So, there are parameters which controls monsoon in short time scale, that probably you can study from the instrumental record. But there are parameters which work on the longer time scale. So, to know that, you have to go to the past, then only you know, okay, these are the parameters which controls the monsoon strength.
It's like, for example, if you are going to observe a school every day, you will see that there is a bell in the morning and the bell in the evening. But you will never know that there is something called summer vacation. Only if you observe in a long term that you will.
Yes,
that's
yes,
a kind of
thing
that you are talking about, right?
Yes.
It's a very, very interesting field, very exciting field. Lots of interesting stuff. Many of the viewers who are in your school, if you are looking for a very exciting and a different career, maybe geology, earth science has a lot of opportunities. And in India, it's also a growing field. With this, we may have to end this conversation. We don't have much time. We could have continued talking about many other things. We'll end this program here, but then keep watching Eureka. In the next week, we'll come with a conversation with another scientist. Keep watching Eureka.